In the morning hours of July 1, 1863, two brigades of cavalry at Gettysburg, Pennsylvania, under John Buford, identified two Confederate corps approaching from multiple directions. But Buford realizes the critical importance of the high ground southeast of town. Instead of turning back to the main body of the Union Army miles behind him, Buford decides to make a stand. June 1863. It has been less than 2 months since Lee and Jackson shocked the Army of the Potomac at Chancellorsville. But Lee has greater plans now. He advances north after Chancellorsville through the Shenandoah Valley, his movements cloaked by the eastern ridges of the Appalachian Mountains. The Army of Northern Virginia moves from Fredericksburg, Virginia to Winchester, Virginia. Lee's army then crosses into the north at Martinsburg in the newly formed state of West Virginia, and then moves further north into Hagerstown, Maryland, and then on into Pennsylvania toward Chambersburg, with Ewell's corps advancing further onto Carlisle. Jubal Early from Ewell's corps advances his division east to York, Pennsylvania. Let's take a closer look at south central Pennsylvania. By June 28th, Robert E. Lee is in Chambersburg, Pennsylvania, with A.P. Hill's corps in front and Longstreet's corps behind. Ewell has advanced two of his divisions, Rhodes and Johnson, to Carlisle, Pennsylvania, while Early's division has advanced from Chambersburg east through a road junction at a town called Gettysburg, while moving on to York. Ewell's men at Carlisle are only 17 miles from Harrisburg, the capital of Pennsylvania. Ewell has every intention of securing the Pennsylvania capital. However, on June 28th, Robert E. Lee learns from a scout that the Army of the Potomac is much closer than he thought. Lee has not heard from Jeb Stuart's cavalry, but he receives word from his scout that the Yankees have already crossed the Potomac River, shown here. Lee's hopes of securing Harrisburg have to reshift to face the approaching Union Army. On June 28th, the Army of the Potomac is around Frederick, Maryland. The cavalry corps, the 12,000 horsemen who form the Army of the Potomac's eyes and ears, are spread along the flanks. The cavalry corps is under Major General Alfred Pleasonton. This 39-year-old commander of the Union Cavalry Corps has positioned his 3 divisions to provide advance notice of enemy units in any direction. Gregg's division is on the right near Ridgeville, Maryland. Kilpatrick's division is posted in front of the main body of the Union Army at Frederick, and Buford's division is posted near Middletown, Maryland on the left. The Confederates had recently gained a newfound respect for Yankee cavalry just a few weeks earlier at Brandy Station. There, Pleasonton surprised Jeb Stuart, and in the ensuing cavalry duel, Union horsemen displayed daring and aggressive tactics. On this day, June 28th, Lincoln has replaced Joseph Hooker with George Meade as commander of the Army of the Potomac. The next day, June 29th, Meade advances from Frederick north toward Pennsylvania in pursuit of Lee. Pleasonton orders Buford's division north from Middletown, Maryland, to cover the left wing of the Army of the Potomac. Buford follows up the valley through Maryland and into Pennsylvania. Buford's division has 3 brigades. Gamble's brigade has about 1,600 men, Devin's brigade has some 1,100 men, and Merritt's brigade has some 1,800 men. Merritt stays in Maryland to guard the mountain passes, while Gamble and Devin ride northward. On the other side, Lee has not heard from Jeb Stuart for several days, but his scout gives him reason to believe the Army of the Potomac will cross over the mountains and strike. Lee realizes he is now vulnerable. He switches course to re-establish a position of strength at Cashtown, Pennsylvania, where he will be on the same side of the mountains as Baltimore and Washington. A.P. Hill is closest to Cashtown. He will move first from Chambersburg across South Mountain to Cashtown following the Chambersburg Pike. Longstreet will follow in turn. Zooming in to the Cashtown area, we can see the Chambersburg Pike highlighted here. A.P. Hill's division approaches Cashtown from Chambersburg. A.P. Hill has 3 divisions, Heth, Pender, and Anderson. Heath's 4 brigades, Pettigrew, Archer, Davis, and Brockenbrough, are in front, arriving at Cashtown first on June 29th. A rumor has spread that shoes are available for the taking in Gettysburg, 7 miles down the Chambersburg Pike to the southeast. Shoes are no small matter. Many Southern soldiers march 20 or more miles each day without shoes. Footwear is a critical part of the uniform, and many Southern soldiers have none. Thus, the next morning, June 30th, Heth sends Pettigrew's brigade towards Gettysburg to get those shoes. But A.P. Hill's men are not the only troops near Gettysburg on June 30th. 2 of Buford's cavalry brigades, one under Gamble and the other under Devin, are in Fairfield, Pennsylvania, just 8 miles from Gettysburg. Buford knows Confederate infantry is nearby, but he finds the local Pennsylvanians afraid to give information, fearing that the rebels will burn down their homes. June 30th. The first preliminary actions of the Battle of Gettysburg occur on this day. Buford's brigades under Gamble and Devin ride from Fairfield, Pennsylvania toward Gettysburg. They have a short skirmish with 2 Mississippi regiments near Fairfield, but Buford decides to avoid a further engagement and rides toward Gettysburg. Meanwhile, Pettigrew at Cashtown advances towards Gettysburg. As he approaches to within 1/2 mile of Gettysburg, he sees Buford's cavalry also arriving near town. It's about 11 a.m. Pettigrew is mindful of Lee's orders not to initiate a major engagement, and without knowing if this cavalry outfit was just a posting or the forward element of Meade's whole army, Pettigrew turns back to Cashtown. He sets up pickets along the road 4.5 miles from Gettysburg. Buford sends troopers up the Chambersburg Road and establishes his own pickets on the east side of Marsh Creek, shown here in blue. Buford's pickets on the pike are in sight of Heth's pickets on the other side of the creek. Buford also sends troopers up the Mummersburg Road to the northwest, the Carlisle Road to the north, and also along the old Harrisburg Road to the northeast. They capture a rebel courier near Heidelberg, Pennsylvania, learning that Ewell is there to the north. Let's zoom back to get a wider picture of the theater on June 30th. Buford has 2 brigades, Gamble and Devin, at Gettysburg. Gamble and Devin's brigades give Buford some 3,000 men at Gettysburg. His 3rd brigade under Merritt is still covering the mountain gaps near Frederick, Maryland. But Buford is going to have to stretch his men even further. Not only does he face A.P. Hill from the west, but Ewell's corps is massed to the north near Heidelberg, Pennsylvania, with Early and Rhodes divisions in Heidelberg. Let's move back into Gettysburg. To monitor A.P. Hill, Gamble's brigade is set on McPherson's Ridge, facing northwest towards Cashtown. Devin's brigade sends pickets and squadrons northwest and north to monitor the approach by Ewell. Meanwhile, back in Cashtown, Pettigrew informs his divisional commander, General Heth, of the presence of Union cavalry in Gettysburg. Heth then discusses the situation with his corps commander, A.P. Hill. A.P. Hill is a man of action, not one to be intimidated by a detachment of cavalry. A.P. Hill gives Heth permission to advance his division the next morning to Gettysburg and find those shoes. Zooming out, we can see that A.P. Hill sends word back to Robert E. Lee, who is at Chambersburg, that Hill will advance towards Gettysburg the next morning to discover the position of the enemy. But Pettigrew was right to be cautious on June 30th. Just a few miles south of town, About halfway between Gettysburg and Emmetsburg is Reynolds' Corps. Howard's Corps is in Emmetsburg, and Sickles is just east of Emmetsburg, below the Pennsylvania border. Slocum's Corps is southeast of Gettysburg in Littlestown, Pennsylvania. Meade's headquarters, in turn, is at Tennytown, Maryland, 12 miles from Gettysburg. This means Buford's cavalry at Gettysburg is right between A.P. Hill and Cashtown, and Meade and Taneytown. Buford knows Heth will return the next day. Buford tells his officers, "They will attack you in the morning and they will come booming, skirmishers 3 deep. You will have to fight like the devil until support arrives." The next day will be July 1st, which will unfold, just as Buford foresaw, with the Confederate advance upon Gettysburg. Back in Gettysburg, Buford prepares himself. He stations his camp at the Lutheran Seminary, where a large tower at the seminary provides a vista from which he can watch the approaching rebels from the north and northwest, as well as watch for his reinforcements from the south. Both Gamble and Devin have forward picket squadrons up the Chambersburg pike, shown here in yellow, toward Marsh Creek, and Devin has covered the roads with pickets on the roads leading to the north. Buford takes good care to note the topography. He will need to utilize every topographic feature to slow down an infantry advance. 1/2 a mile northwest of the Lutheran Seminary is McPherson's Ridge, shown here, which is named after the farmer who owned the land. McPherson's barn is still on the park grounds here. Taking away the vegetation, we can see the area topographically. We can see a number of ridges rippling out like waves. We can see the 2 paths leading from the west toward Gettysburg. The Chambersburg pike is here, and a railroad cut parallels the pike here. Willoughby Run forms the low creek bed here. Willoughby Run provides a natural ditch from which Buford can prepare forward defenses to stall the attack before the ground rises up to the ridges. The ground from Willoughby Run rises 50 feet to McPherson's Ridge. This ridge actually has a second ridge running parallel behind it at 250 yards, and this second line here will provide another point by which Buford can stall the attackers. While lower than the western ridge, the East McPherson's Ridge, shown here, gives Buford a second position to delay the Confederate advance. There is one more ridge before town. This is Seminary Ridge, shown here. Seminary Ridge is named after the Lutheran Seminary, the building still present today, where Buford used the tower on the Lutheran Seminary to watch for enemy advances, as well as for the approaching Army of the Potomac coming from the south. The ridge here above the pike is oftentimes identified as Oak Ridge. Willoughby Run, the west and east ridges on McPherson's farm, and Seminary and Oak Ridge provide 4 topographical points by which Buford can delay an infantry advance on the town. Cavalry are not going to be able to stop an infantry division like Heth. Rather, the cavalry's objective will be to delay long enough for one of Meade's corps of infantry to arrive. Buford realizes the critical importance of maintaining this position northwest of town. If we turn our attention to the other side of Gettysburg and remove the vegetation, we can see the dramatic, rugged slopes that command the area. If the Confederates gain these heights, Meade will have to launch potentially catastrophic attacks against any positions on these high grounds. So Buford decides to make a stand northwest of town in an attempt to preserve the position southeast of town. We will move back to Buford's position northwest of town. The incoming Confederates will have some topography to use too. Across Willoughby Run is Hare's Ridge, shown here. Hare's Ridge is 6/10 of a mile northwest from McPherson's Ridge. And here is a wooded area outlined in yellow near Willoughby Run. While the woods can provide cover for the defenders, they also provide cover and screen for the attackers. While Buford will be greatly outnumbered when A.P. Hill attacks, his advantage is that his cavalry troopers have Spencer carbines, which can fire 20 rounds per minute or 5 times the speed as regular infantry rifles. So as evening falls on June 30th, Buford is alone at Gettysburg, between Meade's army approaching from Maryland to the south and A.P. Hill ready to pounce in the morning. Dawn, July 1. On this day, the small town of Gettysburg will be the location of the largest battle of the Civil War. Buford's pickets watch the roads to the northwest and north. In the northwest, on the Chambersburg Pike, Buford has established forward pickets on the east of Marsh Creek. This position is some 3 miles from the Lutheran Seminary in Gettysburg. These forward pickets are composed of troopers from both Gamble and Devin's brigades, as well as 2 squadrons from Gamble's brigade. At the same time, Devin has pickets stretching from Marsh Creek in the west all the way north to Heidlersburg, 10 miles away to the northeast. Devin's pickets are stretching across this arc, monitoring the roads to the north where Ewell may advance. 5 a.m. In Cashtown, Heth prepares to advance his division toward Gettysburg. Archer's brigade is in the front, followed by Davis's brigade. Pettigrew and Broken Bow follow behind. The Confederate columns move toward Gettysburg. Zooming back out, Gamble's Marsh Creek pickets, 3 miles up the road from Gettysburg, see the approaching force. An officer rides back to Buford's station at the Lutheran Seminary to inform him of the approaching enemy. We will zoom back into northwest Gettysburg, taking an angled view of McPherson's Ridge to better see the topography. We are facing north with Gettysburg and the Lutheran Seminary at the right. The Chambersburg Pike and the railroad cut are shown here, as is Willoughby Run. Gamble's brigade gets in order. His troopers set up along McPherson's Ridge, stretching from the railroad track on its right to the Fairfield Road on its left. The regiments arranged with the 3rd Indiana Cavalry forming the right at the railroad cut, followed by the 12th Illinois Cavalry above the Chambersburg Pike, and the 8th Illinois Cavalry on the south side of the pike, and then the 8th New York Cavalry set east of the woods. An important detail to note: when cavalry dismount, men from the brigade are assigned as horse handlers, which further reduces the strength of the cavalry force because those men essentially have to manage the horses while the other men are dismounted. Devin's brigade forms up above Gamble. Devin will be more spread out, stretching his line from the high ground at the Mummasburg Road, shown here, down toward Gamble. Devin's regiments form up with the 17th Pennsylvania Cavalry situated just south of the Mummasburg Road. The 9th New York Cavalry is below them, followed by the 6th New York Cavalry, and then a regiment from a new state, the 3rd West Virginia Cavalry. Devin is watching 2 fronts, so these regiments here are reduced because squadrons have been sent out to monitor the northern roads. 1 squadron from the 6th New York Cavalry is sent to aid Gamble's right, while other skirmishers are sent north on the 3 main roads to aid his pickets who are watching Ewell's approach from Heidlersburg. Devin is spread thin, providing a wide screen, watching for any movements from the north while also supporting Gamble on the pike. Let's zoom back out. 3 hours have passed since the Marsh Creek pickets reported Heth's advance. The forward post required Heth to halt his column and establish a forward skirmishing line before proceeding, delaying his advance toward town. Here at Marsh Creek, around 5 a.m., the first shots of the Battle of Gettysburg are fired by Buford's pickets. Remember, cavalry are not going to be able to stop an infantry division. The point here is to delay for long enough for friendly infantry to arrive. Heth is now near Gettysburg. Let's zoom back in. 8 a.m. Buford's Marsh Creek pickets and squadrons appear on Hare's Ridge, falling back toward Gamble's position. Heth's skirmishers crest Hare's Ridge. Archer's brigade is in column just behind the skirmishers. Gamble advances 3 squadrons forward and sets them into skirmish formation. The skirmishers leave their horses and spread out along the banks of Willoughby Run. Willoughby Run forms the first topographical struggle at the Battle of Gettysburg, the first point that the Union line will make a firm stand. For additional support, Buford has positioned Caliph's battery on McPherson's Ridge, the two guns on either side of the pike. The remaining two guns in the battery are sent on Gamble's left flank below the woods. Gamble's troopers in the creek fire their repeaters. Caliph's battery opens fire. The Battle of Gettysburg is now underway. So Buford is now utilizing the first obstacle, the bank of Willoughby Run. Then when his troopers are stressed, they will pull back to the main body on the west McPherson's Ridge line, and if need be, fall back to the east ridge on McPherson's farm, and then withdraw to Seminary Ridge behind that. The longer Buford can keep this leapfrog going, the more time he has for Reynolds and Howard's corps to arrive from the south. Heth advances. He sends skirmishers forward toward Willoughby Run, 3 rows deep, just as Buford had predicted the day before. The skirmishers slug it out at Willoughby Run. Time is passing. Heth has a full infantry division at his command, followed by more behind him. He is determined to secure much-needed supplies in Gettysburg, and he is not going to be bested by cavalry on McPherson's Ridge. Heth decides to employ more than skirmishers. In his own words, Heth later recalled, "I was ignorant what force was at or near Gettysburg, and supposed it consisted of cavalry, most probably supported by a brigade or two of infantry. The main body of Archer's brigade approaches up the pike, formed into line positions behind the skirmishers on the south side of the pike." On this afternoon and later in the Battle of Gettysburg, Archer's brigade will lose so many officers killed, wounded, and captured that it is hard to determine what order the regiments were assembled here. However, a Bachhelder map from 1876 shows the regiments arranged like this. On Archer's left, adjacent to the pike, is the 7th Tennessee, followed by the 14th Tennessee, the 5th Alabama, the 1st Tennessee, and finally the 13th Alabama. These 5 regiments amount to some 1,200 men. Heth brings up a 2nd Brigade under Davis, which forms to the left of Archer on the north side of the pike. Davis is the nephew of President Jefferson Davis. Davis's brigade stretches in battle formation. The 42nd Mississippi on the right, the 2nd Mississippi in the center, and the 55th North Carolina on the left. Pegram's cannon is set on Hare's Ridge. Rebel cannon returns fire to the Union cannon on McPherson's Ridge. The 2 brigades approach Willoughby Run. Buford's skirmishers are overwhelmed and withdraw up to McPherson's Ridge. Buford observes from the tower at the Lutheran Seminary. Buford descends the tower ladder, and he hears a voice say, "What's the matter, John?" Buford turns to see General Reynolds, the commander of the 1st Corps, whose infantry are now near town. Buford tells Reynolds, "The devil's to pay." Reynolds reports that his corps is about 1 hour from town. Buford affirms that he will do all he can to hold until the infantry arrives. Let's take a wider regional view. Reynolds rides back to his men on the Emmitsburg Road, urging them faster. He also sends for Howard and Sickles to make haste. A message goes to General Meade that a desperate fight is underway to preserve the heights south of town. Meanwhile, Devin receives word that his pickets are being driven back from the roads near Heidlersburg. Ewell is approaching. Devin sends elements of the 9th New York to slow Ewell's approach from Heidlersburg. Let's return to Gettysburg. Davis and Archer approach Willoughby Run. They are slowed by fencing just before Willoughby Run, yet they cross over the stream and advance up toward McPherson's Ridge. On McPherson's Ridge, Caliph's battery comes under heavy fire. 8 guns under Pegram sound from Hare's Ridge, firing on Union guns. Caliph's 4 guns respond in kind. An intense artillery duel continues through the morning. Archer and Davis push harder. They approach McPherson's ridge. Gamble's line is overwhelmed, and the west ridge of McPherson's farm is overtaken. Gamble's troopers pull back 200 yards to the second ridge east of McPherson's barn. Just after 10 a.m., Buford sends word back to Meade, stating, "The enemy's force, A.P. Hill's, are advancing on me at this point and driving my pickets and skirmishers very rapidly. There is also a large force at Heidlersburg that is driving my pickets at that point from that direction. General Reynolds is advancing and is within 3 miles of this point with his leading division. I am positive that the whole of A.P. Hill's force is advancing. The race to Gettysburg is on. This is no longer a skirmish for shoes. Let's get back to town." Just as Archer and Davis press up toward McPherson's ridge, everything changes. Heth's men receive a shower of lead from the woods on their right. Reynolds' infantry is on the field. The 1st Brigade of the 1st Division of the 1st Corps has arrived, the famed Iron Brigade. General Reynolds is personally directing the 1st Blue Regiments into action at McPherson's ridge, yelling, "Forward, forward, men! Drive those fellows out of that! Forward, for God's sake, forward!" Meredith's Iron Brigade fills into the woods, throwing a hail of rifle into Archer's right flank. Archer stalls, and then a desperate fight reignites at Willoughby Run. Then General Reynolds, commander of the 1st Corps, personally leading his men at the front line, becomes one of the first Union infantry casualties of the battle. It's about 10:30 in the morning. Buford has held McPherson's ridge for 2 hours and slowed Heth since Marsh Creek now for 5.5 hours. Reynolds' Corps, now commanded by Abner Doubleday, continues to arrive, relieving Gamble on the Chambersburg pike. Buford's left wing, now the formation point of the first elements of the Union Army, is resecured for the moment. But Gamble's troopers continue the fight. The 3rd Indiana Cavalry joins the Midwesterners of the Iron Brigade, holding the woods with them. For the moment, Gamble's other regiments pull back to Seminary Ridge. Cutler's brigade arrives from Doubleday's corps, forming up on McPherson's ridge to counter Davis. It's about 11 in the morning. More of Doubleday's men are arriving to extend the line from McPherson's ridge toward the Mummersburg Road. Davis is rebuffed at the railroad cut by fresh blue lines appearing, and the initial Confederate advance has stalled. Let's take a step back to the wider region. With Doubleday now facing A.P. Hill at McPherson's ridge and Gamble's brigade relieved, the spotlight shifts northward, where Ewell is approaching from Heidlersburg. Devin's northern approach must continue to delay Ewell until Howard's corps arrives. We will return to town. This vantage point looks north of town. As late morning becomes early afternoon, Doubleday's corps is holding McPherson's ridge for the moment, here on the left. Devin's brigade, in part, remains south of the Mummersburg Road here, as it had during the morning defense. However, Devin has skirmishers spread eastward, forming a long, thin line, ready for Ewell's approach. Devin also has pickets and vedettes posted on the roads leading north, including the Carlisle Road and the Old Harrisburg Road shown here. A significant high ground point is here at Oak Ridge, just above the Mummersburg Road. Ewell's corps is now near. Devin's pickets report that Ewell's lead division under Rhodes is approaching down the Carlisle Road. It's about 1 o'clock. Rhodes knows the engagement is underway. He moves off the Carlisle Road and into the woods of Oak Ridge. His aim is to secure the wooded ridge and Oak Hill, which will endanger the Union line. But Devin has skirmishers assembled on the ridge. Rhodes' brigade must now form into line, with Doles on the left, O'Neill in the center, and Iverson on the right. Behind the first line are 2 more brigades, one under Ramser and the other under Daniel. Devin's scattered troopers make a stand, holding a position on a knoll that will soon be called Barlow's Knoll. Devin's troopers pelt the front and left flank of Rhodes' lines. Dole sends out skirmishers. Devin is now delaying a second Confederate division on this day. Rhodes advances. However, more of Doubleday's corps is up now, relieving Devin on Oak Ridge near the Mummasburg Road. Doubleday's line now extends to the Mummasburg Road. Rhodes comes in for an attack. Major Eugene Blackford of the 5th Alabama Infantry in O'Neill's brigade recalled, "I moved steadily forward upon the town, driving in the cavalry vedettes posted in the road and on commanding hills. About half a mile from the suburbs, a large force of cavalry was observed in line, with a heavy line of men dismounted as skirmishers. Again, the presence of cavalry is going to require the infantry body to halt and form skirmishers, this time delaying the rebel advance to the north." Blackford reports that the 5th Alabama skirmished for an hour with the cavalry. Buford's troopers have now delayed 2 rebel fronts. Additional divisions from Doubleday's corps are now in place in the west, just in time to counter Rhodes, with a division under Robinson reinforcing Oak Ridge. Howard's men are also now beginning to arrive, forming at an angle to Doubleday's men that hinges at the Mummasburg Road. They are just in time to defend Doubleday's right. Devin's short but important stand north of town allows time for Howard to get men on this position. Howard arrives just in time to meet Rhodes' division, and Rhodes takes significant casualties. For now, the north line will hold. Devin is relieved. When Buford's troopers were relieved on the afternoon of July 1, they had successfully delayed A.P. Hill's advance at McPherson's Ridge the whole morning. Buford's stand gave Meade 2 hours to bring up his forward corps under Reynolds to counter A.P. Hill on the Chambersburg Pike, as well as additional time to delay Rhodes on the Carlisle Pike before Howard's arrival. In both instances, Buford's cavalry were instrumental in providing the time for Union infantry to get in line. These actions preserved the high ground southeast of town for the rest of the Union Army that would later arrive.